bit about the differences and this concept of a user ID, which underpins or can underpin, it doesn't have to. And, you know, with the loss of third-party cookies, the industry is generally moving towards you need to make the most of your first-party data, and a lot of the rest of the session will be focusing on that a little bit. Yeah, so there's different ways of getting data into, you know, your first-party CRM data into GA4, and I'm going to kind of cover that a little bit for, you know, in this next session. So yeah, just to, I suppose, set the scene with what we mean by first-party data in the context of GA4. So firstly, you've got your behavioural GA4 data. So this is what people are doing on your website, people that have added to cart, bought something, viewed certain pages, and that you've always been able to do this. It's based around that client ID, user ID. Yeah, there's nothing new in that really. And then you've got kind of injected CRM data. So this is where we can take what you know about your customers in your CRM, or from deriving or based on many things. And this is, you know, it could be a couple of simple examples there. The account, the date they created the account, or the count of previous purchases, or the spend to date, for example. And then there's, again, behavioural, but events that occur outside of the website or the app. And, you know, a couple of examples I've given there is if somebody buys something in a high street store, or makes a quote, or gets a quote over the phone. There's many others. So yeah, getting that first party data into GA4, there's kind of three core ways really, which I'll touch on in a bit more detail, but you can customize tracking code, a concept called a data import, and then there's another concept called the measurement protocol, and I'll just go through in a little bit more detail each of those. So this is perhaps the easiest for people to get their head around. So if you've got a CRM that's integrated well with the CMS that powers the website, you'll be outputting standard data on the website, you know, perhaps in a data layer, and outputting those into events. But if you've got additional things you know about that customer when they're logged in, you can output that into the data layer or the tracking code, and then proxy that, well, send those on to Google, where it can use them as user properties, user dimensions, and we can, you know, do lots with those. So that's the simplest to understand, not always the simplest to implement. And yeah, I suppose this is another visualization of that really. You know, getting it in the tracking code, Tag Manager will load it and send those events back to Google. But that is not always possible. You know, the CMS and the CRM might not be closely integrated, so it might not be possible to get certain information quick enough into the website, or there might be technical challenges around it. There might be some sensitive data that you just don't want to put on the website. And perhaps more commonly, the cost of doing that, or the availability of your web team to get this set up, is a problem. So you might not want to put that in the tracking code. So there's a solution called the data import that GA4 will provide. And that the whole idea, I mean, I've given a few examples of different types of data import. We're going to focus on the user data import for now today. But the whole concept is you output partial data into that website, into the tracking code. And when I say partial data, you just need to have your user ID in there. Your web tags will fire as normal, pass an event back to Google with that user ID. And in the meantime, you've loaded a CSV file effectively into Google directly that's got lots of good dimensions around your customers that we can use. And the whole concept is, you know, this visualization here shows what you're doing. So on the left, we might be tracking a page view, and it's got a user ID, and we've separately loaded a CSV file into Google. And if, you know, that user ID is present, it'll do a lookup on that CSV file, and it'll effectively add in, as it processes those events, those dimensions. So, I've given a couple there, but you could have a whole host of really useful dimensions about your users, which would add a lot to what you want to do. So I'm just going to go through a few little examples really of use cases and what types of dimensions to help you understand what you could and should perhaps be doing. I've used an online and high street fashion retailer as an example here. So if you when you output your tracking code or visitors on the website, if you knew the count of previous purchases or the lifetime spend, you can do clever things. For example, you create an audience of new customers. So when somebody makes their first purchase, you can add them into a recently acquired customer segment, an audience, and you might be a little bit more aggressive in how you market to those, because you want them to become not just recently acquired, but you want them to become loyal. So you might be, give them special offers or so on. Days since sign up, you could use for a similar kind of use case and example. Age and gender are obvious. If you've got the geo and some features of Google that will help you, but if you want to add something to an audience, you kind of need this age and gender dimension in GA, and then you can add them to a male or a female or over 40s, under 40s kind of audience, and use that to affect how you target people and how you market to them. Product category affinity. So if people like a certain type of product, that's very useful to use in GA, and you can do a lot with it. I've given a local store example there, and the distance to that local store. So if you have got a high street chain of shops, that's quite useful to know, because you can create targeting that's aimed at driving people into that store. But if they were miles away, you wouldn't want to target them. So that's just a few examples there, really. Another example, a travel and holiday retailer. Much the same, really, but you could output things like the type of preference for holidays, where they prefer to go. If they always go to Greece, it's interesting and helpful to know that in analytics, so you can target holidays to Greece in your display campaigns, for example. Are they big spenders, or are they always buying the budget option? There's lots of different things you could you could find and input and inject into GA. Count of children, do they have children, and how many and what age? Again, that would influence kind of what you could do in terms of how you target them and analyze them. So that's a couple of examples around how you would get that user data, or what you would do with that user data. Finally, on the kind of injecting side of things, so the final way you could send that user data, and this is two types really, is a feature called the measurement protocol, and this is effectively Google's syntax or protocol for sending events into the same property that you're tracking off your website or your app, and the idea is you track things that have happened offline, as long as you can join them up with a user ID or a client ID, and then it fills in those gaps. So I've given I think a couple of examples, of offline events. You could configure your point of sale software to send in real time sales if you can identify who they are at that point, or if a lead qualification it happens shortly after a form is submitted, you could I suppose send the result of that qualification, so you have a slightly better metric which gets rid of the spam and the not very high quality leads. In addition to offline events, you can use it to supplement additional information about your user. So shortly after a purchase, you might have been able to work out other information around that user that you might want to add in as those user properties we've talked about. So yeah, just got one example here on a good use case of someone you might use this. If you're a kitchen retailer that has effectively a brochure website, It's just a lead generation tool. So there's various things that go on online. People browse your site. They might request a brochure, or they might book an appointment to have a kitchen designed. But they've got zero value until they actually get the credit card out. So you can track what happens once those leads are taken into your CRM and progressed, really, how that kind of lead progresses. So you could track when a quote is sent out, when they attend an appointment, if they paid a deposit, or if, hopefully they eventually buy something. So it allows a lot in terms of attributing back, whereas the initial form submit might not be very indicative, and you can have different qualities with different channels. So that's the measurement protocol. So last on this, so there's a new feature called user provided data from Google that's only recently been released. We've talked about the user ID and outputting that into your tracking code. If someone's logged in, there's very likely you've got other information about that user. Usually, as a minimum, that's the email, but it might be address or phone number. We're not allowed to send that into Google because it's personal information and would break the terms. What we can do is hash that up and then send it into Google Analytics, and it's very similar to the enhanced conversions, but this is into Google Analytics itself. And Google can do three things when it comes. So Google will use that hashed information to match your customers or converters with its own first-party data, and it can do three things really. First and foremost, it can be used to power the demographic and interest reporting that has previously been driven by a third-party cookie. So it can do and model those demographic and interest reports, age and gender and so on. It can be used to kind of power enhanced conversions, and this is aimed at matching kind of ad clicks through to conversions on your website, where you've got this big gap in missing data in there, and essentially that will make the conversion modeling that Alice will talk about later much more powerful. Enhanced conversions has been around for Google Ads for a while, but it's now available in GA4. And the final thing there is it can be used to kind of, and this is currently in alpha, but it can used to build audience lists, which you can then share back into Google Ads via the kind of customer match feature. So not long from me now, you'll be pleased to know, but finally, I just wanted to touch on not a feature of Google Analytics, but a tool of Google Tag Manager called Google Tag Manager Server Side, because there's quite a few benefits of having something like this. Just to start off, a typical client-side standard Google Tag Manager setup would see you placing Tag Manager on a website, perhaps sending data into that with the data layer. And then you can configure that tag container to send tags to various different endpoints. And Google Tag Manager, the server-side version of Google Tag Manager, it doesn't do away with the client-side version, but the idea is you slim that client-side version down and effectively work towards kind of having a single stream of events. So you send a single stream of events from this client container, probably a GA4 stream, into this Google server-side container that's hosted in a cloud environment. Google Cloud's the main one, but you can use others. And there's a lot of benefits to doing this. So first and foremost, we're migrating potentially third-party tags like Facebook and many others. We're taking them out of your web browser and putting them into the server container, and that reduces the load on the web browser. There's less to download all these JavaScript files. So it speeds the web browser and what have you up a little bit. The next is you get more control over what data you send where. So you can effectively, this might be cleaning an email that's in a URL that shouldn't be there, or it could be stopping Facebook scraping all of the first-party cookies you've got and using them. So you get control over that. But there are more benefits, and more pertinent to the topic of the injecting first-party data is a few little advanced use cases here. So as that those events pass through this client container, this server container, I should say, you could look up a CSV file or find additional data about that customer. If you've got that user ID and the similar method to that data import, you could add in these dimensions before you send them on to Google Analytics. The benefit of this is it's not just for Google Analytics, you could add them to other platform tracking solutions as well. There's other kind of use cases you could do. So I've given a couple of things there. You could, for example, intercept a purchase event and look up the margin on the products in that purchase, and then add in an additional metric such as the profit, which makes that revenue, well, I suppose is a better metric to use if that's the target. So yeah, there you go. That's it from me. I've talked about collection and getting first-party data into Google Analytics. Going to understand. I'm going to have a little chat from Alice about modeling, and Jim is going to tell us how we do the exciting bit, which is using that first-party data and activating it.